Hello, everyone. More lawyers need to talk to the public about what is happening right now. More folks that work in the legal and political system of this country need to talk to the public about what is happening right now and what will continue to happen if the public takes no action and if the public does not level its outrage at the current executive and the current political order. More lawyers need to speak about this. I have been watching very closely what has happened over the last couple of weeks in this country. Every system of government and every country goes through periods of growth, goes through periods of disorder, goes through periods of reform, and goes through periods of evolution. But we appear to be, right now, in the United States, in a period of flux, in full flux between what was an old constitutional order since 1787, the principles of which have been laid out, where you have a legislature that makes laws, you have an executive that enforces them generally, and you have a judiciary that interprets those laws and is the mediator, is the dispute settler between the other two branches of government. You have this system, which is an effective system of checks and balances, so that power and authority is not confined in any one branch and no one branch becomes more powerful than the other. And you have what is an even older system, going back to the beginning of time, of authoritarianism and kingship and dictatorship, where the executive makes the law, the executive has the power of the purse, the executive believes that it is close to the minds and hearts of the people and that it can make law in their best interests. The executive enforces the law, and the executive applies and interprets that same law. So the executive is the sole law, is the sole power and the sole authority. That is a system that is as old as time. It's much older than democracy, and that appears to be what we are headed towards again. I say this to you because in the last couple of weeks, we have seen in this country an assault on the judiciary and the legal profession that is hard to measure. Right now, the current administration, the current executive administration, seems to be consolidating power in a rapid fashion so that the legislature, which was already the federal legislature, Congress, which was already defunct, honestly, and which was already viewed as corrupt by most of the American public because of the vast amounts of campaign cash that they take, that individual representatives and parties take from billionaires and folks individually and folks through third parties and PACs, so that they don't think about the public interest, they think about the corporate interest, they think about business interest, this legalized corruption that we've had in this country for 25, 30 years. This thing that exists in the legislature of this country, that situation there, and to the extent that they are able to effectuate the public interest without corruption, that entire system, that congressional system, that system of lawmaking and delegating powers of the purse and using the power of the purse to tell the executive what to do, the notion that there is any power in the Congress is being wiped away. The executive seeks to assert authority over every branch of the federal executive, over every agency and department, and it seeks to make Congress essentially invalid. It seeks to terminate the authority of Congress. Right now, the executive is cutting positions with no regard towards what the Congress wanted, with no regard towards what the interests of the people were, what the statute says, what the law says, and the fact that Congress has given the money to fund these programs. The executive seeks to terminate entire agencies and departments and to allow third parties, billionaires, to run the government and to benefit themselves and to enrich themselves at the public's expense. The executive also seeks to essentially assert its own immunity from any criminal or civil prosecution so that it can get rid of inspectors general, so that it can skirt the law, so that it can investigate its opponents, so that it can weaponize and use justice, use the Department of Justice to stoke fear in its opponents. This is happening now. On the other end of things, you have the judiciary, which, frankly, is the strongest of the three branches at this point, and the one that is most dedicated to some form of tradition and the rule of law and governance. This system, this branch is under attack. The executive seeks to ignore court orders, to threaten judges, to impeach judges, and to do all this in an attempt to ignore their orders and to implement its directives and its sole source of authority and policy, no matter what the judiciary says. In this country, we have, going back a couple hundred years, the principle that the judiciary is an independent branch of government and that it interprets the laws, and it is the mediator, the dispute mediator between the other two branches. That principle is going out the window as well. So, to some extent, the public voted for this, but I doubt even that the people who voted for this current administration, that voted for the Republican Party, knew that this was going to be this chaotic and that the executive would do what it's doing now. This is what's happening in this country. This is, from a historical perspective, probably somewhat inevitable. Every country goes through what we're going through right now. Every system does. But the public has to ask itself, do you want this? Do you want a system that is set up in an authoritarian model where the executive can investigate, prosecute, try, and convict people at its whim? If you say anything about the executive, you risk being audited, you risk being investigated, you risk being prosecuted, and Congress is but a shell, a rubber stamp to anything that the executive wants to do, really at the whim of the executive, so that someday in the future, the president might say, you know what, Congress, you are irrelevant. I abolish you. And a judiciary that at this point is still putting up a fight, but these traditions and these properties that have made the rule of law so effective in this country are slowly being chipped away. So the public has to ask itself, do you want an authoritarian model where there is no rule of law, there is only the rule of the one, and that is the person that is sitting in the White House, the person that is in the executive branch and their administration? What do you want?